Good morning and welcome to Funky Rainbow this lovely Saturday morning. Great to see, friends there already waiting for us. Arunji, Book Pickle, what a pleasure to see you at the bazaar this morning. The thing is, we always, now that things have really opened up and schools have really opened up, there are weekends when we have to be at pop-ups. We're doing events and reading programs at schools to introduce contemporary Indian children's books to students, teachers, librarians, and sometimes we just don't have the bandwidth to do both things at the same time. One of our dreams, and I hope this year, by the end of this year, we'll be able to crack it, is to host a bazaar live from wherever we are, and we're going to be working at making that happen if possible, keeping fingers crossed. The thing is, even today, there's a lovely little Montessori school in Bangalore called Shikshana Montessori, where Funky Rainbow's co-founder Muttama is with a collection of books for our youngest readers, and so there's a smaller team here at the office, helping with pulling off this bazaar. Of course, the reason we put together this bazaar today is the arrival of a wonderful new book, in the Indian children's literature space, After Midnight, A History of Independent India. We received this book, I think 2 weeks ago, basically, in our collection. And I can't tell you how lovely it was to have a book that traced the history of post independent India. Often, books stop with independence, or maybe just a couple of years after independence, or maybe like sort of stretching to the 70s to encompass, to sort of trace our growth till, let's say, the emergency. But it was such a pleasure to read Megha Gupta's A History of Independent India, because it really focuses on, the course of our nation post independence up to very, very contemporary times. She even has a segment on the pandemic and its impact on our country. So we rarely get books, and in fact, that's will be part of our conversation today. We rarely have books that recount contemporary history, and I wonder why. I mean, I wonder if there's a reason behind not recording current events as contemporary history. And I think Megha, who's meticulously researched this book and written it, might have some thought provoking answers for us. Arun, I can see you're saying, good to hear. It'll be really good if it works out. Yes, we're really keeping fingers crossed and hoping, if when we are in places like Tirunelveli or, in Madurai or Chandigarh or Mysore, with our pop-up and doing sessions for students and teachers, it would be lovely if we could host a bazaar right in its midst. It's a lot of logistical work, but where we have a tech genius in our team, one of our co-founders, Sham, and we're hoping he'll be able to truly make this a traveling book bazaar as well, keeping fingers crossed. So the entire bazaar today, I was fascinated by the way she's classified, the way she's sort of made the history of modern India into segments, the kind of segments she's chosen, the kind of information that she's put into the book. And so my recommendations have pretty much stuck to her classification of important ideas, important events, important milestones that have gone into making our country what it is today. I mean, one of the premises that she has, when we got our freedom 75 years ago, nobody, just nobody, not even many of our own political leaders, believed that we had what it takes to survive or to emerge as a nation. They really didn't even give us a chance, thinking that we may not really survive after colonial rule goes off from India. But here we are, 75 years later, one of the most diverse and the biggest democracies in the world. I mean, this growth, this history, it's not that it's, only a story of triumph and success. There are tragedies, there are pitfalls, there are problems. And what is wonderful with Megha's book is how beautifully she encompasses the tragedies and the triumphs of what makes India the complex and fascinating country that it is today. So, like I said, I mean, it's a book that I really believe adults, children, I mean, we would say children 10 plus, but, and adults of all ages, even for somebody like me, it was such an eye opener to understand, the social, the political, the economic, the technological, ideas and events and milestones that have shaped India into being the country that it is here today. It's a wonderful book, people. Young or old, pick it up, have it on your shelves. It gives you, like one of the, the blurbs on the book says, a whistle stop tour of the history of post independent India. So her first segment, and I'm going to recommend books that fit into those segments in the course of this bazaar. Her first segment, which is called Laying the Foundations, begins with that momentous incident that happened right after we got our freedom, the partition. And the book that we've picked today, and there are lots and lots of books. We've done bazaars on India, we've done bazaars on independence, we've done bazaars on iconic Indians. So it's not like we have all those books in our bazaar list today. I mean, if you want to look at iconic Indians, there's a separate bazaar for it. You can go to the tab that says Book Bazaar, click on the seasons. There's season 1, 2, 3, 4. These are basically just themes, on which you can look at books. And I think for today's bazaar, we haven't included specific Indians unless and until we didn't have books on a particular event or a milestone that Megha is focusing on. Muttama is saying hello from Shiksha Montessori. We did just say that you were there and delighted that you've been able to log in from there, Muttama. I was just telling all our viewers that one day we're hoping, and I hope we'll crack it at least by the end of this year, to host our bazaars, right from our pop-ups, our lit fests, and from school events, or whatever we do most Saturdays and Sundays, wherever we're doing these things. So the first book, on the theme of partition is this one that I know maybe many of you are absolutely familiar with this, The Night Diary by Veera Hiranandani. It's such a beautiful book. It's a Newbery Honor book. I mean, and I know, once you read it, you know exactly why it has that wonderful award tag to its name. What is this about? I mean, it's 1947 and India has freed itself from the British rule. And of course, it's been divided into two countries. It's become Pakistan and India. What of 12-year-old Nisha, who is in Pakistan? I mean, she's witnessing the migration of people from one place to the other, the riots, the killings, the violence that accompanied partition. And her father, who's Hindu, just feels that it's not safe for their family to stay in Pakistan anymore. And he decides that he is going to embark on a journey to come away to India. So what of this girl who has to leave her home? He has to leave everything that she's familiar with. And suddenly you have to undertake a journey and perhaps become refugees, embarking on a journey to India. The trek is, of course, the walk is long, it's difficult, it's dangerous, it's arduous. And Nisha's mother, who she lost as a child. I mean, Nisha has been brought up by her father. She lost her mother as a child because her mother was a Muslim. Now what happens when her country is getting ripped apart like this? She's walking into another country. What a beautiful account of the partition for young readers, The Night Diary by Veera Hiranandani. And it's not it's a Sindhi perspective of the partition, which is very, very different from the Punjabi perspective, because they come away to Bombay. They, decide to come away to Bombay, not to go into Punjab, across the border like that. So I think it really offers a great insight into this event that literally shaped the course of our country, in the decades to come. Wonderful book. We would recommend it, 10, 11 plus year olds, actually for adults of all ages. Absolutely a must read, both for the way it's written and for its content. Our next set of recommendations, is a set of history books, I mean, by Archana Garodia Gupta and Shruti Garodia, called The History of India for Children. There's a volume 1 and there's a volume 2. The picture of volume 1 coming up on your screen, which is from prehistory to the Sultanates. The reason we have these books as a pair is because I wanted to focus on the second one, which is from the Mughals to the present. I mean, we don't have, like I said, we don't have that many history books that come into, the history of modern India. And we're delighted that Archana Garodia Gupta and Shruti Garodia, and Archana Garodia being, the winner of Mastermind Asia, an IIM alumnus, really. And I think, in recent times, or perhaps in the last season, being the person who assists guests on the Kaun Banega Karodpati show when they want to call an expert and get an answer to a particular question. Archana Garodia Gupta, perhaps one of those experts that they can call. So obviously really, really interested in facts, really, really a quizzer, and has this fantastic book co-written with her sister, who's also a huge history buff, on the history of India. Now, in volume 2 of the book, she absolutely comes up right to the present. I mean, I'm not saying present as in present like Megha's book, where we literally have come up to the times of the pandemic, the CAA, NRC, the migrant laborers, the migration of migrant workers during the pandemic. But here, Archana and Shruti come up to the point of the liberalization of India, when really India sort of really broke away from the shackles of colonialism. 200 years of colonial rule. I think we slowly started to come into our own with the liberalization of India. So these are two wonderful books. And, when you read them as a pair, starting from the first one and going up to the end of the second title, really giving you a great sense of the course of Indian history. It is, these are just lovely books. And, I know we have a lot of books on the history of India, but we've picked a few. We've got Subhadra Sen Gupta's children's history of India, and we've got a couple of others. The reason we've put only these ones in the show is because they do come up to contemporary times. Of course, and I mentioned Subhadra Sen Gupta, and all of you, Tara Veeraraghavan, good morning. We just love it. We just love what a committed grandparent you are, to, watching the show and, picking up books and sharing it with the different children in your lives. I mean, we're so delighted that, so many of you come and watch us so regularly. Of course, I was talking about Subhadra Sen Gupta, and all of you, know that we are huge admirers of her work. So our next set of recommendations, and also sort of based, like I said, my picks today are loosely based on Megha Gupta's classification, in her book. I mean, the segments that she has created called Laying the Foundations of a Nation, The Seeds of Development of a Nation, Trying Times That Have Tested the Nation, and Towards a New India. She's got subheads. I'm not going to give away everything to you. You all have to pick up the book and read it, absolutely. But my choices loosely based on the way Megha has planned her book. So, in the laying the foundation segment, there is partition, of course, and there is, the ideas of India. So we've, got the history book, and she has a segment called the greatest experiment in democracy, and for that we have two excellent books, very very familiar ones, on the Constitution of India. What a fantastic document, what a worthy endeavor to undertake to define the way a nation's journey should be made. I mean, the founding fathers and mothers of our Constitution really thought this thing, the document, through. And I think it bears a lot of importance to, today, that we remind ourselves what is written in our Constitution, and why it is important for us to use the founding principles of this excellent document, even when we chart our way through contemporary history today. We have, of course, Leela Seth's wonderful We, the Children of India, the preamble to our Constitution, illustrated by Bindya Thapar, a beautiful little book that actually tells our youngest readers what it is, really, what is it, when we say we are a sovereign, socialist, democratic, secular, democratic republic. What is it? What does that mean? Are they just big words? Are there meanings to these words? And you can see, accompanied by photographs and illustrations, that are just delightful bits of trivia on, explaining the preamble to our Constitution for, to our youngest readers. We would absolutely recommend this for, kids as young as 8, 7, 8. And, I think it's nice, if you start talking to them about history. I mean, children, they're growing up in really challenging times. I mean, these times are, while there are many many things that are available at the click of a fingertip, and life, it sort of seems like an easy, it seems like an easy ride. It isn't. There are just so many things happening in the world around us, so many things that are happening in India, that must make it very very challenging for young people growing up today. And I think these books, when you introduce them to these books as adults, parents, teachers, librarians, aunts, grandparents, you demystify the, you make it easier for them to understand the present, by linking it to the past in some ways. So this one, we'd say, for the youngest of readers. And of course, Subhadra Sen-Gupta's marvelous book, The Constitution of India for Children, illustrated by Taposh Guha, which is just pages full of wonderful information on what this iconic document, this remarkable document, which not only lays down the laws of the land, but also unites India into one. And of course, Subhadra and Taposh, who, have worked together for very, very many years, and have a fantastic sense of humor. So you can see the book is peppered with all kinds of little, cartoons and jokes and bits and bytes of trivia, that really demystify the most remarkable Constitution for readers. We would say 10 plus, definitely. Like, what language was our Constitution written in? Were women part of the team that drafted the Indian Constitution? I mean, we know Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, of course. I mean, India's first law minister and the father of, the Constitution. But were there women on his team? Of course they were. And, we need to know we need to know who those women were. How did they contribute to the creation of the Constitution? What is really the official language of India? This book is a compendium of knowledge on the Constitution. We can see lovely, lovely writer Nandini Nair joining us this morning. Hello to you. Utterly delighted that you've joined us at the Buzzaar after many, many moons. I know that, schools have opened up and just a whole host of things going on at the moment. So happily, if you've been busy, Nandini, doing writing and doing your school events, you are excused. But we are delighted to see you here this morning at the makers of the making of modern India Bazaar. Thank you for joining us. So those were two excellent books on the Constitution, one for slightly younger readers, one for slightly older readers. And when we say younger and older readers, we mean the best children's books must work for all adults. So from there, we're moving on to another book. I mean, this was from, like I said, I've used Megha's wonderful book, After Midnight, A History of Independent India, as a peg to choose the books that I'm recommending in this show. And, the book on partition, the book on the history of India, which comes up to reasonably contemporary times, the books on the Constitution, they are from the segment that she has called laying the foundations. I mean, laying the foundations of the nation. And of course, we before we move into the part that's called seeds of development, which is, which is such an exciting part in the course of India's post-independent history, I want to say, there is politics. There was there was a lot of differences of opinion going on what the course of this nation should be. And it's not like India's diplomacy was at its sort of fine best at that point in time. We were a young nation. We were making our space in the world, and we had just the impact of the partition. So what of our relationships with our neighbors? Well, we have this lovely book, Uncle Nehru, Please Send an Elephant, written by Devika Karyappa and illustrated by Satvik Gade, that just so delightfully presents to our youngest readers India's journey, diplomatic journey. I mean, undertaken by our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. What a remarkable man, children loving him as Chacha Nehru. And, from this book, you can tell that his jumbo diplomacy, I mean, and I'm saying quote unquote jumbo diplomacy, what was that about, and what did it do to build India's reputation in the world? I mean, Devika Karyappa has written a fantastic book, really, for our youngest readers. We'd say 5+, 6+. You just have to pick this one to understand what our jumbo diplomacy was all about, and how is it that children were involved. And you can see, of course, an elephant with a big bow on the cover. And well, it was about a child saying that they had never quite seen an elephant, a child from Canada writing to Pandit Nehru saying that he'd never seen an elephant, and if he could send one for them in Canada, which he does. And then, of course, so on from there on, how many children from how many parts of the world asking to see Indian elephants. I mean, it's a for a child, it's a pleasurable story to read. I mean, so much happiness in this story of getting to see a real elephant. And but at the heart of it, as Muttama reminded me yesterday, is the thing on Indian diplomacy. It is actually a lesson on India's diplomacy. And of course, in the generations, in the decades that have followed, we have, of course, wonderful diplomatic missions with several countries. Arun saying, I utterly enjoyed reading Uncle Nehru. Of course, Muttama, from the pop-up, please recommend this book to the parents who are there, Muttama, at Shiksha Montessori, saying that you must narrate the story from Canada. I'm just going to run through it very, very quickly. About this little boy who wrote first from Canada asking Jawaharlal Nehru to send them an elephant in Canada. It so happens that, of course, the elephant went and they were utterly delighted. He grew up and, he, I think, went on to become a teacher. And of course, many, many decades later, somebody had, another teacher who was in that school, an Indian lady, had picked this book from Tulika and taken it back to read for her students in Canada. And this gentleman who was in the same school, had to tell her that this was his story. I mean, just imagine what books can do, what books can really do, how it can build bridges between countries. It's just such a delightful story. It's up on Tulika's blog. They have written, he has written the story of, one of getting to see the elephant, and two, of course, discovering the book many decades later when he was a math teacher. So you'll definitely enjoy that one. Muttama reminding me that she was Muttama, another Muttama was India's first ambassador, and Indian diplomacy was top notch then. Our next set of recommendations moves to the segment that Megha has so nicely, titled Seeds of Development. And of course, it begins with India's journey into the nuclear age. It's our foray, our scientific developments, our foray into space. And so the book that we have now that we're going to recommend, and I'm just going to check if this is what's coming up on your list, Sham. Okay, or maybe not. Sorry. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. I got that order wrong. So the one that sort of sets the pace for. I can see Book Pickle saying, "What an extraordinary story that is! The serendipity of it all. That's what it is. The world of books and the power of books. I mean, these are things that the best writers cannot plot." Right? Imagine stumbling upon a book that was his own story, at least in part, his own story. I mean, it's just remarkable. And I'm delighted that the book and the person did meet many, many years later. So for him to write and tell us, write and tell us about this extraordinary story. So, like I said, the Seeds of Development section, we're beginning with a book called Mission India, A Vision for Indian Youth by APJ Abdul Kalam and written by Y.S. Rajan. Now, why have I chosen this book? I mean, Abdul Kalam, of course, the minute we say development, seeds of development, India's former president playing a pioneering role in making us a modern nation, be it, space technology, be it nuclear power, and, even inspiring young people to develop a scientific temperament and take India into the future. Now this one, a book that was written very, very many years ago, is a sort of roadmap for young people. We'd say again 10 plus. And it outlines, in various ways, like what does it take for India to become a developed country? What is our what was the agricultural revolution in India all about? What about biotechnology? What about clean energy? What about education? Now he's got these small segments, there are little chapters in every book that really lay out a roadmap for young people to understand, India, to understand the complexity that makes it the country that it is, and for young minds to apply themselves to the problems that we face as a country. I think it introduces, it's really based on that book that he wrote, I think, for adults, called A Vision for the New Millennium, India 2020. Of course, this was a dream that Abdul Kalam wanted to achieve by the time India hit 2020. I think we are there in part, but it's not without problems, as is the case, I think, with all countries. And I think what is lovely about Kalam's book, co-written with Y.S. Rajan, is to say that, we can set these goals and they're not unrealistic if we really do work towards making India one of the world's, best nations. David Williams, so lovely to see you after ages as well. Good morning, and thank you for watching us from Australia. Must say, I'm glad the English language found a happy home in India post-independence too, or we'd have a lot less fun communicating. If anything, due to the fact that Indians realize that there's more to life than increasing its speed. As Mr. Gandhi said, you speak a grander, more wandering brand of the language than we do. So very well said. the lovely thing about our English, David, is that it's brought in the cadences of the Indian languages themselves, words from the Indian languages. It's wandered into different parts of the world, as you so nicely put it, and we have made all these tongues, all these. All these words and dialects our own. So yes, it's a unique brand of English, and we just love it a lot more than just very English. I mean, I have to say that one. Of course, to come back to the book on that Abdul Kalam wrote on a vision for Indian youth called Mission India. We have a set of books, and I'm just going to quickly show you the covers. I don't have time to talk about these books, but you do know that nuclear power, clean energy sources, these were great preoccupations of Dr. Kalam. And so we have this wonderful series from Terry, which came to us just 2 weeks ago. It's called Future Power Energy. And, there are various, kinds of energies the different books deal with: nuclear energy, solar power, wind power, bioenergy, and hydrogen power, all future energy sources. And we absolutely, it takes these books sort of fantastic for a school library. We have it up as a pack. It's very, very reasonably priced, and we do have a discount, a 15% discount on it. So any of you teachers and librarians watching, do pick up the copies for your school library. It looks at these various sources of power. I mean, these various kinds of powers like nuclear or solar or hydrogen as clean sources of energy for the future. And it was something that Dr. Kalam was very, very interested in. Of course, when we talk about APJ Abdul Kalam, the India's space journey, and I hope in the way that I've picked books, you are, getting the sort of loose timeline of India's, post-independent history. Because the next book that I recommend, and is something that we just love at Funky Rainbow, Topi Rockets from Tumba, a beautiful chapter book written by Menaka Raman and illustrated by Anada Menon, that takes you back to India of 1963, when we were just ready to embark on an audacious adventure to launch our first ever rocket into space. It's such a lovely, lovely book. It is, I mean, there's this, this sort of sense of pride that surges. I mean, never mind what age reader you are, it just surges through you to know that we actually dreamt those dreams, and how those dreams have contributed to who we are today. So this book, of course, is narrated through the eyes of a 9-year-old girl in Kerala, in Tumba, in the place Tumba in Kerala, young Mary, who feels nothing ever happens in sleepy Tumba. She's just going to school, and she's coming back, and how boring can it get? But that is still Vikram Sarabhai, the pioneer of India's space program, lands with his team in Tumba, told through the eyes of this inquisitive young 9-year-old. This account that is, sort of traces the journey, like, leading up to India's first ever rocket launch. It does such a fantastic job of it. And I think our youngest readers, you can see that the book doesn't have that much text, lots of illustrations. We would easily say 6+ year olds that get a sense of how we dreamt that we can explore space as well. Siddharth Nair, good morning, and good morning to two young, lovely readers, Avyukt and Ameya Nair. Delighted that you're here at this bazaar this morning. So that was a space. I mean, there are several other books. We've got the those magnificent women and their flying machines, of the ISRO ladies who did the Mangalyaan launch. We've got several books on these themes, but thematically, there are books on in this part on seeds of development. There is a book on nuclear, on nuclear energy and India's nuclear capabilities. There is this thing on rocketing into space, which began at Tumba. And of course, what is wonderful about Megha's book, and we will definitely talk about it later, is that it's not that this journey is just been smooth sailing. There are a lot of problems that we've encountered. As much as there are triumphs, there are tragedies as well in the course of this journey to becoming a modern independent nation. And one of those was the problem of hunger, the growing population, the problem of hunger, the problem of not having enough milk in our own villages where a lot of milk was produced. It's wonderful that Megha has looked at political, economic, social, cultural, milestones, events, and ideas that have shaped the history of post-independent India. Lakshmi Karunakaran, so delighted to see you here this morning. Always lovely when somebody from the Parag team joins us, and we are so glad that you're going to be watching this chat that comes up with Megha shortly, because this one after midnight, and I know you said you were going to be coming soon with some friends who want to pick up books. Be sure that we're going to, if you're looking for books for older readers, we're going to recommend Megha's After Midnight, A History of Independent India to you for sure. So in this segment, of she talks about the growing population. We need more food. There was a need to get more food and food scarcity. We want to focus on two books. We have, of course, recommended the book on Verghese Kurian several times, brought out by Scholastic, called The Milkman of India. But this time we're recommending a picture book on Tribhuvan Patel, the story of a farmer and a milkman, from Tota's Books to Inspire series. Now, when we found out that, so much of the milk that is coming into our cities comes actually from the villages, why was it that at that point in time there was a big scarcity of milk for the people in the villages itself? How did we work to set that right? Well, a part of it was certainly the brainwave of Tribhuvan Patel, who, absolutely inspired by Mahatma Gandhi and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, dedicated his life to improving the conditions of rural India. I mean, he led farmers against unfair trade practices, of the, I forget the name of the dairy, of the Paulson dairy, of the Paulson dairy. And he worked with, hand in hand. In fact, he hired Verghese Kurian, as the person who was going to market this idea to India. And the two of them, what they did to set up this cooperative called Amul. I mean, Amul, the taste of India, it is just synonymous with all things India, really. And, how was this cooperative set up? How did we become self-sufficient in milk? I mean, it's a triumphant story, if ever there was one. And this book, I mean, really, for our youngest readers, I mean, if they were going to read it to them, 3 to 5 year olds, 3+ year olds, and if they're going to read themselves, for 5+ year olds, is such a lovely book on the milk revolution, or at least the beginnings of the milk revolution, and one of the men who was part of making that possible. Of course, the wonderful Verghese Kurian book from Scholastic, which is part graphic novel and part text, also tells that story in greater detail. And while the issue of food scarcity, while talking about the issue of food scarcity, we did have the Green Revolution, of course, where we tried to make our farmers more self-sufficient and, to grow enough food to feed the growing population of India. Is that just a smooth sailing journey? Well, it worked initially, but it was not like the Green Revolution. And some of India's finest thinkers, MS Swaminathan, for instance, put their heft behind the Green Revolution. Has it served us well even at the present date? We do know there was a large farmers protest, that went on for a few years against, these practices. And how has that served us today? These things, to understand the problems. I mean, I know a lot of kids know that the farmers protest, was going on, but what is it? Where were the roots of this revolution to be sufficient in food for all our people? What were the beginnings of it? Books like this really help to put our contemporary history in context for young, and I think even for older readers like me, who are able to get a sense of the growth of post independent India. Siddharth saying the Milk Book gives a history of the Operation Flood. Not many people know about Tribhuvan Patel, who was the initiative of Amul. Absolutely. We all know Varghese Kurian, who is, of course, a dynamic man. And, at one time, I remember when when my parents would speak to us about Amul and Varghese Kurian, I remember wishing that he would be, one of our political leaders at a particular point in time. I mean, that's the kind of adulation that we had. And of course, the Amul ads, they really helped in the 80s, right? But Tribhuvan Patel, I mean, an unknown name, and there was no reason, for that to be, and hence these wonderful books. Shantanu Datta Gupta, what a pleasure. Long, long, long time. Hey, hey, yes, hey, hey, back to you. What's up? Buzzaar's up. Plus, lots of events happening in schools and pop ups. Things are just, exciting at Funky Rainbow. And today we're doing a bazaar on books that trace the course of the history of India after independence. Arun, you're saying Terry has some fantastic books. And in fact, in that food context, I want to recommend Think, Eat, Save, which is written by Sandhya Rao and published by Terry. I mean, it's a lovely book that goes into what it takes to grow our food and what it takes to that how much of food we waste. What happens to this food that we waste? And is it just waste from homes, or is it that books? I mean, is it that food that is grown from farms that cannot reach the people that also goes to waste? I mean, it's a book with Terry's typical concern about the environment. It teaches us to, not waste. I mean, tells us why it's important not to waste the food that we eat, and how we can actually ensure that 1.4 billion people, one sixth of the Earth's population that exists in food to eat and not go hungry, and how each one of us can play small roles in building that self-sufficiency for food. I mean, it's a lovely book written by Sandhya Rao, former editor of Tolika, and we would absolutely recommend this in the context of food. Vijay Nagraj, so lovely to see you here. You're saying happy to be here for another fabulous bazaar. Cheers. Thank you so much for cheering us on, for coming with us to all our events here, there, and everywhere. Vijay was with us in the School Lit Fest that we conducted in Tirunelveli, doing some fantastic sessions for young readers. And she has, of course, like Sham reminds me, some excellent books from Terry, all of which are in Funky Rainbow's collection. The next section, and I'm just going to see, I think we have very little time, so I'll just run through a couple of more books before we get into the conversation with Megha. The next segment in her book goes into trying times, and one of the sections there that I really enjoyed reading is called An Era of Protests. And I do have 4 books again from Terry, outlining some fantastic people's rights movements that have taken place in India. I'm not going to go into the details. We've recommended these books quite often, all of them written by the wonderful Subhadra Sen Gupta. The Forests Belong to Us, about the Chipko movement. And these are just some books. There are a whole host of other books on these movements in our collection as well. Do log into our site, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click on the tab that says Bazaar, Book Bazaar, and there are 5 seasons. Each of the classifications, each of the themes that you see, there are books under a particular theme. And this one is called Modern India. We haven't put iconic Indians into this show, but if you want to get books into books on iconic Indians, just click on the tab that says Iconic Indians. Lots of books classified, so it becomes easier for you to find them thematically. So there's this one on the on the Chipko movement. There is the River of Life, the story of the Narmada Bachao Andolan. What a powerful, powerful people's movement to prevent this building of the dam on the Narmada. And these people's rights movements, I think they give us a lot of context as to what is happening today. Like I keep saying, these books explaining to young readers the bewildering times that we live in, right? I mean, what is the context? So when we look at it through the lens of something that's happened in the past, I think it helps readers, young and old, make sense of the times and be inspired to see how we can make a change, how we can build India into a more progressive nation than it is. There is the one on the Silent Valley campaign in Kerala, where they didn't want those evergreen forests to be cut down, and the people protested against it. And the troubled waters about the Ganga, and keeping the Ganga clean, and sort of really making it the source of a lot of our water. 4 fantastic books on people's rights movements. We've also got the graphic novel on Shaheen Bagh, which is a protest movement so contemporary, just happening, that happened 2 years ago. Several such books. We've got Nida Finds a Way, which is a beautiful book of fiction set with the CAA NRC at the backdrop of it, the Shaheen Bagh protests at the background of the book. Lots of lovely books to read like this. The next one, and I really I'm glad that Megha has this segment in her trying times, the world's worst industrial disaster. I mean, we know, I mean, growing up, we were children of the 70s and 80s, and growing up, that story, the unfolding of the horror of the Bhopal gas tragedy. I mean, the kind of negligence that caused just hundreds and thousands of people to be impacted, not just when the tragedy occurred, but for decades after. Lots of lessons to be learnt on how, whether, how do we sort of do this balance? How do we find the balance between capitalism and the and the securing the rights of the people? I mean, we both are needed, but how do we safeguard the interests of the people? So we have one book from Terry called Salim's Journey Through Hell, which is written by Sarupa Mukherjee, and so aptly titled The Never Ending Saga of the Bhopal Gas Tragedy. It's a lovely little book. It takes place, there's a young boy, and the factory, the Union Carbide factory, from where the methyl isocyanate leaked out. There's a young boy who makes his way into that ghost factory with his friends and uncovers a story of horror which he and his friends simply didn't quite know of. They know it's a defunct factory. They know that people have been maimed and people around them have continue to suffer the impact of that gas. But what is it, and what caused this? It's a wonderful book that we'd recommend. Again, you can see, we'd say 9, 10+ year olds to understand this Bhopal gas tragedy. And in Megha's book, she's talking about, yes, I mean, we're delighted about nuclear power, and that we can harness these sources of energy, but these are all double-edged swords. And she does present with a lot of honesty, with a lot of maturity, these difficult themes and topics as well. I just had I think we're almost out of time. I mean, she had another segment towards a new India. So I'll just quickly, show you the books that I had put out over there instead of talking about it, because we'll hear, Megha talk about it and give us many, many interesting perspectives. David Williams, you are saying, oh heavens, Bhopal was the Chernobyl of its day. Too bad its name is synonymous with that disaster around the world. In fact, we have an excellent book in our collection. It's an international title. We don't have that many foreign children's books, but this one, called The Blackbird Girls, is set, of two girls whose fathers worked at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. And so a lot of books that help children make sense, young readers of all ages make sense of the world around them. So in Megha's section called Towards a New India, she's talking about where's the money? Did we have a scarcity of money in our country? And we have a fantastic book called So You Want to Know About Economics by Rupa Pai that explains how, and it explains to us, especially to me, oh gosh, dreary economics, but it's anything but dreary. It gives you an indication of how economics determines a lot of things that happen in our everyday life. And for young people who are who are going to be future entrepreneurs, who are going to be future writers, who are going to be future, creators, scientists, very, very good, book to give you a sense of money and the economy. Megha has a section on technology. We have the Little Handbook of Cool Technology. I mean, cool technology. I guess a lot of young people so conversant with technology at the moment, having done schooling online for 2 whole years. But this one telling you how technology can be used in different ways, and of course, she does touch upon that lovely segment in the book, One Nation Many Religions, which I absolutely enjoyed reading, where she touches upon present the CAA and NRC. But one book that we absolutely want to recommend on that theme is The Battle for Number 19 by Ranjit Lal. What a fantastic book, set right after the assassination of our Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And, a bunch of schoolgirls have just come down from the hills to Delhi on that day for a picnic. There is mayhem in the capital because Indira Gandhi has been assassinated by her Sikh bodyguards. And these girls are from different religions and nationalities. And there are riots that break out in the city. Where are they going to find shelter? Do they find shelter? And how do they discover that sometimes the line between right and wrong runs so dangerously thin? It's a beautiful book. We'd recommend it for 12 plus year olds, 13 plus year olds. And I can see Book Pickle saying Battle for Number 19 is incomparable. It indeed is. It's, when we set books in the political context of India, in the context of real people's rights movements, like we do have, Year of the Weeds and Unga and all of those in our collection, it just makes the explaining, it just makes children, and these are books of fiction, I think it just gives them an understanding and a certain empathy, which I think only books make possible. That's of course from the Funky Rainbow's perspective. I'm just going to quickly check if our guest for the day, Megha, is here. Okay, Sham says she hasn't logged in yet. Will please let me know if she has come in, Sham. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to call her and check whether she has connected in, because we need to get onto Instagram as well. But till we, wait for her to join. Just 1 second here. Just take this. Muttama saying, I remember Ranjit being asked by a child in a school how he gets away with writing on such controversial topics. Well, writers really are perfect people to, demystify, just to unravel the complexities of what it is to grow up in modern India. I mean, and I really think this is one of Ranjit's finest writings. Sham tells me Megha is here now, and we're just going to say hello to her before we get her to connect on Instagram as well and get into the conversation with her. You can send her the invitation on Instagram too, right? Once she kind of comes up. I'm going to introduce Megha. Muttama sending me summons. Please, please convince more and more people to buy Indian children's books instead of sending summons across the chat saying, please get down to writing a book for children right away. Orders, orders, my God, really. But while Megha is connecting, I'm going to introduce her. Megha Gupta has worked in children's publishing for over a decade and believes in the most beautiful way that all change begins with getting children to read books that demystify the world and its infinite possibilities. How beautifully said. She has contributed to a book by Dorling Kindersley called A History of India, A History of the World. On this day, A History of the World in 366 days. In the Indian context, she had her first picture book come out a couple of years ago called A Home of Our Own, published by Tulika. And in recent times, this fantastic environmental history of independent India called Unearthed, just a fabulous book that traces the environmental history again of independent India. And we're delighted that she worked with Penguin to create a companion book called After Midnight. And you've heard me referring to it right through this conversation. After Midnight, A History of Independent India. Now, I want to say that these two books are available as a pack on Funky Rainbow at a fantastic discount. Unearth, the environmental history of independent India. After Midnight, A History of Independent India. It is at a fantastic discount. Do consider picking up both the books. Gifted to children who are 10 plus, gifted to young adults, gifted to the adults in your life who are trying to make a sense of the conundrum that modern India is. These are two fantastic books. And I must say that Unearth has just gone off our shelves. And now we're looking forward to After Midnight doing the same thing as well. Megha also curates the children's and young adult section of the online magazine Sustainability Next, and is the co-founder of the Green Literature Festival. Let's just say hello to her, Sham. Hello,
Hi, hi,
Megha.
hi, Vidya. One second. I am trying to get the
Hi, hi, hi.
contraction.
We
The last,
are, while you were sort of setting up and connecting, we took the liberty of introducing you to our audiences. We have just, I mean, we've done bazaars and bazaars for 2 years, but I have never pegged one entirely on one particular book. All our recommendations today were based on your segments, each one of your segments, and I think it gives our readers, young and old, such a fantastic perspective of India after independence. Thank you for writing this lovely book, Megha.
thank you, Vidya. Most flattering coming from you. Really means a lot. And of course, lovely to be on the bazaar.
Uh,
I've always maintained, there have been some sort of hallmark initiatives if one were to map the history of children's literature in India. And one, of course, I always say, Swati and Venki's Bukaru. And I think definitely the bazaar features very much in it as a fantastic
oh.
initiative to just push this literature out in the world. I am just waiting for the
We've sent
Instagram.
you an invitation. Just
Oh,
a second. We're just sending you the Instagram invitation before we start chatting. So our
yeah.
friends on Instagram can view as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just a very complicated contraction. I have to.
We negotiate this part of independent India because we have our chief technology officer Sham handling all of these really for us. Like, okay. So we've sent
Oh,
out the invitation to you. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. I
Are
hope
we
this
good?
works. Yes.
Okay. So before we start off, Megha, I'm just going to quickly say Divya Purandar saying that's a great compilation. Love the environmental history. I mean, she was listening into the bazaars, and we closed saying that at Funky Rainbow we have these two books as a pack. It's called the Independent India Pack, and I think all people 10 plus, children, young adults, grandparents, everybody needing to pick that up. And Divya Purandar saying that she loved the environmental history, something you don't get to read often. Book Pickle saying, hello Megha, looking forward to hearing you today and to reading your book. She has,
Thank
of course, been a lovely supporter of Funky Rainbow and our bazaars. And even before the bazaar began today, she placed her orders for the books that we've sort of recommended in the course of this bazaar. Sunila Kulkarni Gupte saying, hello, Funky Rainbow, great to be here. Hello to Megha. Arun G, librarian from Hyderabad, saying, I just added these books to the school library. Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj, writer, storyteller, saying, hi, Megha, lovely to see you. And one last comment before I let you, say what you want to. David from Australia saying, you've shown me racks of books in bookstores grappling with the conundrum that modern India is. My head would spin attempting to explain it to kids. So I have shown you books for adults. Now all the books for children are at Funky Rainbow, David Williams. And Lakshmi Karunakaran from Parag saying she's absolutely looking forward to reading your books. Go ahead, Megha.
I'm thank you so much. I'm perpetually I don't know, just pleasantly surprised, because I think in the course of the pandemic, we've gotten so used to living in our little isolated little, our isolated little lives and spaces. So it's always nice to have, to hear all of this outpouring of support and people who support you simply because of books you've written, people you haven't met, and which is why I think books are such wonderful mediums to connect. I mean, there are so many writers, many of them no longer with us and some with us. And I don't know whether I'm going to ever meet them, but because of their books, I feel like there is some sort of personal bonhomie. And
Absolutely.
I know the best writers, even if I never meet them, I know with their books I have a piece of them in my conscience, in my library, in my home, wherever.
So well
One of
said.
my favorite thing is to just shout out about those books.
So well said, Megha, so well said. But we're going to get started, and we hope, there'll be generations of people who say that about your books as well, right? I mean, so what made you write a history of post independent India, Megha? I mean, tell us about this latest book of yours and why you believe, really, it's so clear from both Unearthed and After Midnight that you believe that young people are likely to understand the times that they live in better if they understand the present, through the lens of the past.
I think, Vidya, one of the things is that sometimes when we sort of map our lives into adulthood and childhood, I feel that we kind of forget that we were all once children and we grappled with the, same. I still, I sometimes maintain that actually we are all in the process of coming out of childhood. The adult is, some sort of a morphed version of the child. And for me, one of those things was also just understanding the news that is constantly hitting us. And in my house, from the time I was a kid, the newspaper was something which one had to read as a matter of, practice. My grandfather insisted upon it. And for my mother, it was, well, you read your books, you read your storybooks, but also try and read the newspaper. And I realized that the media doesn't always have the space and the time to give context to the news that children are hearing, or things that are being discussed in the news on television or in the newspapers or online. So my books are actually, because they deal with contemporary times, they are more in line as, a chronicle of the times, which sort of, I mean, some of the most heartening feedback that I've got on my books are that, is that they have helped people decode a lot of the news that comes to them. And I
Right.
mean, I'm going to best illustrate this with an example. For example, these days, the Gyanvapi mosque controversy, which
Mhm.
one is
Mhm.
reading so much about in the newspapers. Why is it so important? Why are we discussing so much about this mosque that possibly a child wouldn't have heard of? Is because we have a Babri in our history. And we know what the demolition of that mosque did to the secular fabric of this country. I've lived in Bombay. I have friends who've lost family members in the bombings. I have friends from Gujarat who were caught up in the middle of those horrendous riots. And to think, that this is what a state fiddling with religion can do, is something which is very important for every Indian to know, regardless of age. Yeah, probably really young children. I think as a writer, would like to believe that one needs to trust the agency of children to
Correct.
handle complexity, and they do. I've had some of the most fascinating conversations with kids in the course of taking my books to schools, and I really think that we need to write about these things. I'm so thankful to publishers I've worked with, especially in the context of both of these books, to Shohini, who has never kind of backtracked and told me, well, this is a very difficult topic. She's kind of trusted me to deal with that in books, and to write on issues of issues like this in the times that we live in can be a difficult choice even for the publisher to make.
Correct.
But I'm so glad that these books have come out, and I just hope that we have more and more books that demystify the story behind the news that children are getting almost on a daily basis, and help them understand a little bit about the evolution of this country, you know uh, in modern times.
Very, very, very nice. That point on agency, giving our children the agency, and they do. They are absolutely able to rise to the understanding the complexities of life so well, and as you say, when you interact with children, you really get a sense of that. One of the things that I felt reading, these two books, and these bazaars, what they help with is to revisit books through new eyes. I mean, every single time, like, right. I was looking through Unearthed and After Midnight in that context, and I mean, the overwhelming importance of, say, 15th August 1947 in our history books means that we know so much about what happened before. I mean, we're able to trace our history, for 200 years of colonial rule, even prior to that, really. But we know so little of what happened after. It made me think about this, and I know I sent you questions at like way past the midnight hour when India was making a tryst with destiny, but you know that I'm a complete owl. Thing is, why is this the case, like, right? I mean, why do you think scholars and historians, they want to feel that like a generation has to go past, like 100 years have to go past before current events get recorded as contemporary history?
No, but yeah, I mean, I think history is an evolving subject, right? I mean, it's not always that we had books on the Mughal period or the British period. Yeah. So every period has literature that is gradually being generated. And yes, I mean, there is a lot of debate around, what can constitute historical writing and whether that will fit into a particular sort of time period. But I feel like, this is something which is being tackled very well in the adult space, in fact, through initiatives like the
Correct.
New India Foundation fellowships, where lots of contemporary, very, I mean, almost invaluable literature. I'm so grateful because a lot of my education on contemporary history comes from those books. And we have such a rich body of that text. Books on, I mean, for me, one book that I keep re-quoting again and again, and the running joke in my family is that I can probably do a PhD on it, is Ram Guha's
you
India
know
After Gandhi. I can't even show you my copy. You would probably turn in your seat because it's a paperback, and it's a tome. So a paperback tome is a very, very fragile object when it's been turned over, countless times, and fitted with notes and writings and personal, things which annoy me sometimes. When I'm reading a book and I get annoyed, I'll scribble notes about what a dimwit, things like that, about things that happen. But anyway, but I feel it's coming into the adult space, and I think it's only a matter of time that we start having more of this literature, for children. I know we've spoken about this before, that it's not very easy to find books on contemporary history for children, but I do think that we are going to hopefully, we have like sort of on books on episodes in
That's
independent
true.
India.
That is
But yeah,
true.
I'm hoping that this history is going to get mapped more and more. I don't know what is the reason. I mean, sometimes I think it's also got to do with the fact that this history is not taught as much in our schooling system, and sometimes publishers
Correct.
tend to tie in what they publish with what children are actually actively being exposed to in their schools and educational institutions. Although I would think that that's a very limited view of what publishers and how publishers are choosing to publish. But it could be possibly one of the reasons. I'm just guessing here.
Yeah.
But I'm
Yeah.
very hopeful that we are going to have more and more books on contemporary India coming out.
So
And just this Independence Day, 75 years, we've had such so many books come out in the adult space. I'm hoping we're going to have many in the children's space too.
that's right. I can see many people concurring with your choice of Ram Guha. Divya Purandar saying Ram Guha's book is fantastic. Arun saying I'm a big fan of Ram Guha and the way he deals with history. And of course, he's popped a question in for you, which we can just take very quickly. He says, of course, about children getting agency, but, how does one author or one book or one children's writer counter the WhatsApp university that hundreds of people are attending? And when even textbooks are really muddled about history. I mean, it's a very, very difficult question, but, you can give us your thoughts on it, Megha.
I actually, Vidya Arun has touched upon something which I completely believe in, because I've had a lot of discussion about this when I wrote my book. One of my concerns was that there's already so much of fake news, and the WhatsApp university, as Arun puts it, is leaving no stone unturned in peddling sometimes utter trash into even adult minds. And the thing is, a lot more people have access to that than to literature. Books like these, because of English as it is. Books in English have a limited readership in India.
Correct.
It's just about 10% of the market. But I feel everything is a drop in the ocean. It's an effort. One protest, one movement will not change the course of history, but an effort needs to be made. We know that there is a problem, but we need to find a solution. For me, the solution was writing a book which tries to counter these false notions that are being put into children's minds. And when I take this book to schools, some of the things that children ask me can be profoundly disturbing sometimes.
Correct.
Questions around, even the teachers squirm sometimes, questions around religion, things that they witnessed and heard in their own families. And I think it's just it should be, the fact that we have a book and we're discussing this on the pretext of the book
I think,
becomes a
yes.
ground for them to explore those questions that may be inside them. So I feel like we need to create more such literature for children, so that we open more
Absolutely.
windows to this house that has been closed for so long, and fed with all this with all this false WhatsApp university generated news.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, I mean, very difficult to come up with a one stop solution to a question like that. But
I can imagine.
yeah.
I can see Book Pickle. Of course, she suggests one possible way is to ditch textbooks and focus on teaching history as a skill. It's a good suggestion, but Arun on the academic side that is saying that I agree with you, but one can't really do away with textbooks. And Lakshmi from Parag, raising that great question: while there are fellowships like the NIF that support writers writing on contemporary difficult themes, what kind of support exists for the children's literature sector? She's asking that question. And I think, Megha, you
I
will be
think
able.
Lakshmi is the best person,
Yeah,
though, to answer that
exactly,
question.
exactly. I was going to say the person who's put out the question possibly has a part of the answer herself, really, right?
Yes, yes. I think, Vidya, you know what? Individual people, as people, we can talk. And I think talking brings forth a repository of ideas. And ideas in turn spur action. Sometimes we might not have thought of something a certain way, but reading a particular book or listening to a particular conversation can, if we are in positions where we can do something about those questions, then
Hmm.
we do that. and possibly encouraging the writing of contemporary history by bodies like Parag, which
Correct.
foster a culture of literature, which support one of the few bodies supporting children's literature in India,
Hmm.
might be a very interesting way forward. And I mean, not just Parag, I think there are other all organizations and people in positions where they can influence the creation of much needed literature
Absolutely.
is a way forward. I mean, it's all, as I always say, it's every little drop
Drop.
fills comes together to form an ocean.
Yeah, I
So
couldn't agree more with you. And I want to say that, I really believe this, that, books have to be created. The ecosystems for reaching these books to readers have to be created. And I think, in the last 5 years or maybe 10 years, lots of little independent bookstores across the country, doing a lot. You took, Swati and Venki's Eureka's, you talked about Eureka. We know there's Kahani Tree. I think different people building communities around them, that probably will push the demand for more such books. Our readers want honest, mature books, to demystify the present. And I'm hoping that, little initiatives like ours contribute in some way to making this happen. I know Lakshmi has another question for you, Richa, but I'm going to, before asking you that question, and actually it's connected in a way, I want to ask you, what did it take you to, research and choose these milestones and events and ideas, that sort of shaped the history of post-independent India? I mean, and I was saying this right through the show, that what I found really valuable was the fact that, you record with honesty both the triumphs and the tragedies of the last 75 years.
So, Vidya, it's a combination of various factors. I'd say, a lot of, so my family is based out of Delhi, my grandparents, uncles, a lot of them have been part of, have occupied senior positions in government service.
Hmm.
And growing up, there was this whole culture of reading the newspaper and sharing anecdotal stories of contemporary times. And I'm not saying they were historical narratives, but just very interesting. Like one of my uncles was posted in Assam before many northeastern states were carved out of Assam, and he said he went to a village for a couple of days that shared a border with Bangladesh, and every evening the children on either side would, children and young men would congregate, and they had goal posts, one in India, one in Bangladesh, and they were kicking ball, you know and
Very nice.
yeah, and then my grandfather had stories. I think there was just a lot of sharing of anecdotal stories from their own experience in government service. I know when you were talking about Ranjit's fabulous book, The Battle for Number 19, it's one of my favorite books by Ranjit Lal. But my own mother was actually on a bus when the rioting broke out,
Oh,
and she had this very bone chilling narrative on how, and those days there were no mobile phones,
of
obviously, so
course.
there was no calling, and she and another friend were stuck there, and they were really scared, and they made a dash of it. And yeah, there were a whole lot of very some very bone chilling and some very moving encounters of when history makes a brush with the personal life of people. Because what I love about contemporary history is it's lived history.
Correct.
It's a history for which you can find people who will tell you what they felt, instead of kings and queens. I'm not taking anything away from that history, but who've been long buried, and we are kind of getting retrospective accounts of their lives. What I find so fascinating about contemporary history is the live people stories. I
Hmm.
mean, and I've got some of them in my book, about a doctor in Chandigarh who was a
Absolutely.
Hindu who had to treat Sikh militants. And Lakshmi's here, but I should say that one of the books that I have also really liked reading is Punjab by Amandeep, and I think even written to him, and such fabulous books, Vidya, really. And so it's one part of it is obviously this whole tradition in my family of sharing and reading the newspaper and sharing these
Stories.
stories. And the other is, reading books like Ram Guhar's books, like Punjab, like, there is a fascinating book by one Arun Kumar, called Midnight's Machines: The Political History of Technology in India. So
Oh,
there is just such an abundance of fascinating literature for adults. I wish that some of those books, if nothing else, can be adapted for children.
yes,
Uh,
indeed.
yeah, I mean, and that is what, I think, reading over so many years and with this very long sort of childhood connection to contemporary history, it kind of, you start forming ideas in your head about how history has played out. And obviously right now I'm a lot more mature than I was back in the day when all of this was being fed into my little brain. But I think so when it came time to write this book, it kind of was my own personal history with whatever I had encountered that came together to form, a narrative. And I think that's true of any writer. It's a little bit of
Yeah.
us and it's a little bit of what we read.
Yeah, that was very very nice point made. Actually, we I grew up as well, and a lot of these stories. When I was growing up, when I was recommending the books, Varghese Kurian. I remember my father speaking to me so many times about Varghese Kurian. Each time we'd see the Amul ads and get totally thrilled about them. On building that self sufficiency in milk. So like you say, personally, when you hear these as well, right, they do form a part of your consciousness. Of course, Sunila Kulkarni is saying, Richa, more books for children, lots of more fiction, all based on history, would really help put things in perspective. Before
Yes.
we take Lakshmi's very relevant question, I want to ask you, because the what I'm asking you will then lead to that one. So you have, like I said, rockets zipping off to space in your book, and you have riots that have literally raised us to the ground. You have the triumph of the milk revolution, and at the same time the tragedy of Bhopal, the greatest industrial disaster in the world. There's the controversial CAA NRC that you're touching upon, and India's goals of switching to clean energy. I mean, somehow in the reading of the book, right, you got the impression, I mean, and that's the impression that I feel that young people should get as well, of India being such a complex sort of country, such a diverse country, and a really an enigmatic a conundrum essentially. Now, if you had to pick two events, and I'm sure choosing the things that you put in as milestones that make the history of post independent India, I'm sure it hasn't been easy, but if you had to pick two things that are very representative of our modern Indian history, what would they be, Megha?
I should say this was probably one of the hardest questions, Vidya,
Yeah.
because it's. I've thought and thought and thought about this question. But I think if I were to pick just two and I had no option, I'd say the first one would be the first elections and the fact that we chose to
So
be a democracy. Because, you know, democracy, ideas like democracy and secularism are unifying ideas. They unify people regardless of so many differences. So I think the fact that India chose to be a democracy, something which it was being mocked at, I mean, let's also just see,
mhm.
India became a democracy in 1940. We chose to become a democracy in 1947. In
Right.
Australia, Aborigines only got voting rights in 1962. And
Correct.
in the US, women got voting rights in 1920. And these are countries far more developed than us. We chose to give our people suffering in, many of them abjectly poor, only 12% literacy rate. And people were like, where will these people have the sort of thoughtfulness required to vote? But the fact that we chose to become a democracy and give our people the right to choose representatives who form the government, I think is one
Mm.
very sort of uh, is one idea which I'd say, despite everything that has happened, I know democracy, many people say, has become more of a popularity contest, and populism has creeped in, as it has in many parts of the world, even democracies that exist abroad. We probably have such a proliferation of political parties, and democracy becomes a tamasha every time there is an election, and all that happens. But I'd still say the fact that we chose to give this voice to our people, regardless of their social situation, their gender, their religious, leaning, their caste, is truly wonderful, because what one observes in the history of the last 75 years is how the right to vote has allowed different social segments in this country to actually acquire political clout and increase, whether it's the farmers coming into their own in the 1980s following the Green Revolution. Lots of things wrong with it there. It's not a very easy, like, oh, but it is about people, different social groups who were, really suffering under colonial rule, and also, under long standing traditions,
Of
social
course.
oppression, whether it's the caste groups acquiring political clout because of the fact that they were given the right to vote. And so that is one. And the other thing I take great pleasure in is our space program. I think it is something that every Indian ought to be so proud of. Technology was nowhere in our, horizon when we
Correct.
became independent. And space programs are so expensive, they are
Correct.
just such they are such a sort of, cost to a country, that for India to choose to do that reflected the vision of those men, men like Jawaharlal Nehru and Homi Baba and Vikram Sarabhai, to have dreamed with open eyes that this is possible in
Correct.
this country. And also, I should say, I was reading this fascinating book by one Gurbachan Singh.
Yes.
I can't remember, but he says, to everybody who is because today religion seems to be all over the place, and in India, a country where religion is said to be all important, we always talk about this. But all our greatest endeavors, and the space program is one of them, is when we have forgotten all the things that separate us to come together. Think of it, there is a church in a small place like Tumba giving up its land to these
Correct.
scientists. And these scientists, you have Vikram Sarabhai, who's Hindu, you have Abdul Kalam, who's a Muslim. Nobody cares about these things. But this is just
Absolutely.
setting perspective. In this country, we've had a Sonia Gandhi, who is, a Catholic, Roman Catholic woman, and giving room to. And there are complications. I'm saying there are people who will always say, this is symbolism, this is tokenism. I buy all of those things. But, there is some a measure of hopefulness to tokenism as well, for somebody who's looking at it, to see a Sikh prime minister in a country where you have had a very, very terrible history of insurgency and bloodshed, and what happened in Punjab,
Of
uh,
course. Blue Star.
Operation Blue Star, and what happened to the Akal Takht. So these are, I feel that uh, our history has these two, and I mean many other things, which prove to me that we have the ability. We are essentially a very resilient people, and if we want, we can do some, great, great things in terms of, if we want, if we when we have the will, just simply because we are 1/6 of humanity. There is
That's exactly
actually,
what
there is
I was saying. Yeah. I
we
mean,
can really accomplish great tasks. It has to be about forgetting things that separate us and frustrate us. To think of how we can come together is what is really important, regardless of the political climate in the country. I think individual people, children, adults, have that agency if they really want to think about things like that.
I couldn't agree more with you. The contradictions. If we can celebrate these differences, and it just enriches the way the country is. I mean, and since you pick space, I mean, it would have been definitely one of my choices as well. I mean, distinctly remember Rakesh Sharma blasting off into space, and then when that conversation that got broadcast, what
Yes,
does it look like? Sare jahan se acha. Your heart was just bursting with pride at
I
that
know.
point in time. So I mean, and we were young kids, we were all really young then. But before I move on to our next question, Lakshmi raised an important point. She says, how is it possible to kind of create an ecosystem that sort of brings out these thought provoking books in the context of the fact that we are now presently often trying to sanitize many things for children, really, right? I mean, when we're sanitizing content for children, how, what kind of encouragement have you found, to write these books that present the history of India in all its complexity?
So, Vidya, obviously support from publishers is very important. If my publisher itself is like telling me that, listen, let's not cover this, okay? And I can swear, I know we had doubts, how many conversations I've had with Shohini about this, with my editor Smith Zaveri about this, about, where does one draw a line? But my idea is that, one cannot like lie about what is truth. The truth is
Correct.
truth. There are many ways of telling the truth. There are ways of telling the truth in a manner that will incite the reader, or there are ways of telling the truth that will impose or foist your own opinion of the truth upon the reader. And then there is just telling the truth as is. So I think
Absolutely.
the conclusion we reached is to tell the truth as is. We're not going to embellish it, but we're going to tell it. We may choose not to, ponder over some subjects at length, but we're going to say everything like that happened, good, bad, ugly. We're going to put it all in there. And
Nice.
apart from, I think, support from publishers, I think it is also sometimes, I read a very interesting piece, I think it was by Karan Mahajan,
Mm,
on writers self censoring while writing, especially
correct.
when the times are difficult. It's so natural. We want to avoid trouble as people, right? And especially women in this country, we want to avoid trouble. So, I mean, I don't know whether I'm making a very sexist comment there, but at least that was
No,
I did
I think
many times.
all writers admit to that self-censoring. I mean, you have a certain comfort level with what you're writing, and you bring to your writing a certain rigor that you have sort of that is self-moderating rigor, right? And it's true of public discourse. It should be true of public discourse. It should be true of writing. So that point is well made, Megha, really.
And also, I think Vidya, finally, so of course, support from publishers and writers choosing to, think very seriously about this ghost of, self censorship that tends to hang on one's shoulders when writing, especially writing history, because you cannot hide behind the fiction. Not taking anything away from fiction writing, but these are times when people are being imprisoned for saying the truth. So one is always a little concerned, but I feel like if you say it just right, then nobody can, question it, because what happened is all over. It's in our newspaper archives, it's on the internet. One of the boons of technology is it's all over the place, it's not hidden
Yes,
anywhere.
absolutely.
And finally, I think something which I did with my own book is because I was so obsessed with the fact that I had to tell the truth as is. I
Mhm.
sent this book to a couple of historians and people
Excellent.
whose opinion I trust for a sensitivity and a fact check, to ensure that when they read it, it wasn't something that was coming out of, like, they read it. I didn't know these people. I frankly have no connection with these people, but just for them to read and tell me that, listen, is it working? Do you think that there is something which I've missed out or something which I could say better? And that kind of exercise also really helps. So,
That's a good point. I know we're almost out of time, so just
yeah.
two quick questions. But I can see some really nice comments. Vijay Lakshmi corroborating that some of the best stories on history that she also heard from her father and mother-in-law who witnessed some of these movements that we're talking about. Sunila saying that several stalwarts that had an immense vision and were allowed to follow it through by the government and were not repressed doing it in any way. Arun saying this is an absolutely amazing discussion we're having. And Vijay saying it's only adult minds that distort facts when they tell children, but I believe if you put it in a correct perspective, children do understand, and that's been her experience, much like yours, Megha. So I'll just two questions. One is, of course, your book, which can be perfectly paired with the earlier one, I mean, After Midnight, A History of Independent India, which can be perfectly paired with Unearthed, an environmental history of independent India. You're also the co-founder of the Green Literature Festival, and Sustainability Next, which is the online magazine, and you curate the children's and young adult segment. Tell us a bit about your love for going green.
Actually, this also, interestingly, I mean, there is a whole lot of serendipity there. But I think my interest in environmentalism also came from my interest in contemporary history, because environmentalism is one of the most contemporary concerns we have. I mean, in the aftermath of the Industrial Revolution and of colonization and the Industrial Revolution, it was only in the 60s and 70s when the world started. Sorry, I have to, my contraption has been affected. So I have
You
to,
have to send us a picture.
yeah, yes, I will. I will. But, you know, the thing is that environmentalism is such a contemporary concern. 60s and 70s, we see, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring that came out, spurred a debate, was an important landmark in the brewing environmental movement. And then, in the 70s, the different acts that came in different parts of the world, including in India, we had a clean air, a
Absolutely.
law that was passed and things like that. And in the 80s was when, the world started really panicking about issues like climate change. The
Change.
IPCC was formed in 1988. So, the formation of these bodies, I think for me, when as I read contemporary history, that hit me as, something which, oh God, which isn't kind of, which is not being discussed as much in in our history books. And I felt like that that's sort of what got that's what got me interested in in environmentalism, the historical perspective. I don't ever make any claims to being an environmentalist, but I think reading and researching and writing these books has made me very ecologically conscious in ways that I probably wasn't, maybe 10 years before. And yeah, the other things kind of just came in the aftermath of Unearth getting published.
Lovely.
Uh, and yeah, it just happened, Vidya. I think because I think nothing was written on the environmental history of independent India till Unearthed happened in the children's space. I'm not saying there are lots of books in the adult space again, but it just so happened that I've met Benedict Permanent, who has been quite supportive again. Just finding right people, the kind of breaks that happened. So then the Green Literature Festival happened, and he happened to have this section on the on sustainability next, which kind of facilitates Green Lit Fest. And he was interested in covering children's literature in it, and I'm like, oh, okay,
It's
it's got to
just
be children's literature, I'm in for it. I'm going to do, I'm going to get on board and do it. And yeah, so
yeah,
it's a bit of
no,
my over enthusiasm and a few lucky breaks, and then it's just one thing led to another. Yeah.
No, that's just lovely. It's great that, a lot of everything that you've been doing has stemmed from the writing itself. I mean, that
Yeah.
itself is such a great answer to sometime how life can take you in such wonderful directions. We know, before I move to the last question, we know you're going off to do a course on creative writing and environmental fiction in the UK. So, wishing you all the best and hoping some wonderful books will come out of that exercise. I do have inside information that you're going to try to facilitate some exchange of books between the two countries. So more green power to you, Megha, really.
Thank you so much, Vidya. It's actually a course in environmental humanities with a focus on children's literature. Just very glad that the university accommodated my request. And, I'm getting some time off to go and study what I've wanted to study, what I have some passion for, and that things have just fallen into place. But
Wonderful, wonderful. Really, more power to you. So, just in conclusion, because we've perfectly run out of time and exceeded, what do you hope, young people reading your books will really glean about being Indian and their uniqueness and strength as Indians, Megha?
Vidya, one second. Sorry. The thing is, as I say, when I started writing this book, I myself sort of thought very seriously. I mean, you don't. It's not one of those questions. Now that one day you're sitting and you're like, "Acha, why do I like being an Indian?" It was when I
Correct.
started writing this book that the first question I wanted to have an absolutely clear answer in my own head was, "Why am I writing this book? And what gives me so much pride at being Indian?" And I've written it in my introduction to the book. I said, being an Indian has enriched my lives in ways I don't often realize. So I've traveled from Nagaland to Gujarat and from Himachal Pradesh to Kanyakumari in the last 36 years of my life, and witnessed the kind of diversity I think you will not find elsewhere on the planet. In
Correct.
terms of the sheer number of languages, cultures, ethnicities, things to see, food to eat, because I'm quite a foodie. Uh, you know, uh, it is so incredible, and I feel that instead of looking, and I know difference can be very daunting, sometimes it can. uh, I remember the first time I went to Chennai, and I had spent a lot of my life living in the north of the country, and I went to Chennai, and a lot of people at that point, they didn't even speak in English, they spoke in Tamil, and I didn't understand the language. I really felt at sea, and initially I was so intimidated, and I really felt like a fish out of water. But what I realized in those years when I stayed in Chennai and worked for Tulika is that, diversity is such a wonderful thing. And I
Absolutely.
remember the unadulterated pleasure of when I learned to speak the language, and I won't say I speak fantastic Tamil. I speak workable Tamil, but I made sure that I had my pronunciation spot on, and I learned, and then one of my favorite times was, so when the vegetable vendor was my Tamil teacher, and he was
Okay.
teaching me the names of the different vegetables in Tamil. And so one day I came and I made an order in Tamil. And he was so proud of me, and he was, நல்லா இருக்கும், and he's like, you know, it just made me so happy, and I'm a very easy to please person. My mother says, somebody can feed you nice food, and you'll give the world and the moon and the stars to them. And but it was so, I mean, I realized that it has enriched, just being exposed to this diversity has enriched my life so much. I've learned so many languages. I've enjoyed Malayalam cinema, I've enjoyed Tamil cinema, apart from Bollywood, music from different parts, food from different parts. I mean, and now that I come back to Delhi, many people say, I am outside Chennai, but Chennai hasn't left me, and that my English also
That's
has a
right.
very, very clear, southern twang to it. But I really think, Vidya, I wish that in reading this book, people realize that diversity isn't a bad thing. It can be daunting, it can be intimidating, but it can also be so deeply enriching. And if you're on
Absolutely.
this planet, and whatever number of years we stay alive, if everything that hits us is something which, adds to our own knowledge, adds to our own personality, teaches us things about the world which we wouldn't have learned had we not been exposed to those things. So I just wish that children reading this book realize that it's what a long way we've come, and just the sheer number of people we've pulled along in the path to coming where we are. And
Ah,
yes, there are problems, there are challenges, but there are also ways out of it. And the
out of
solution
it.
is with the people, with people embracing instead of othering.
Very, very well said, Megha. Many people, absolutely resonating with what you're saying. Vijay saying, thank you, Megha, for the stimulating discussion. We would love to be there at the Greenlit Fest sometime. Funky Rainbow, thank you for this wonderful morning. As always, Vidya taking us through all the books. Sunila saying, thank you so much, Megha, for this lovely session, and congratulations. Wishing you the very best in your course. And Funky Rainbow, too. This has been great. Arun wishes you all the best on your writing endeavors, and thanks FR for this session. And Sunila, of course, saying, Megha, I had the same experience in Chennai. I used to do namaskaram to my help, telling her she was my teacher. I just absolutely love Chennai. Many, many such I remember Sham telling me, that he learnt all his Tamil from, cassette covers and movie posters. That's how he kind of learned to speak it. And the pleasure of then speaking that language, just like you sort of mentioned. And of course, he says all thanks to Ilayaraja that he knows his Tamil really well today, basically. But that's the beauty that we're all celebrating. Sumi Chandrasekharan, also the writer of a lovely picture book, Korukatta, saying this is such an interesting chat. I absolutely loved it. Thank you, Megha. We've really taken up a lot of time, and I know people are probably waiting to hit the books and grab some lunch as well,
Yeah.
probably. So we'll, thank you for this, for these wonderful books, and for this really engrossing conversation.
Thank you, Vidya. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Penguin India, to Shohini, and to Grishma, who's been, putting this together. But
Yes.
really, thank you to everyone, and I hope people read the books and many other books come out of contemporary Indian history. So,
So I'm going to, quickly say thank you. But Megha, you can sign off a book pickle saying, also saying thank you to you for that lovely session, Megha.
thank you, Vidya. Thank you, Sham. Everybody else at Funky Rainbow. Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Such a pleasure it was to talk to Megha, and time to just say thank you to everybody. But we begin with saying thank you to Penguin Random House India for supporting this bazaar and for publishing these excellent books. I'm going to say, just say a quick hello to everybody who signed in: Arunji, Book Pickle, Richa Pandey, Swati, Sandhya, Chitwan Mittal, Divya Purandar, Tara Veeraraghavan, Rituparna, Priyanka, Kaju Joy, Nandini Nair, David Williams, Siddharth Nair, Ameya, Avyukt, Modern Book House, Prerna, Shantanu Datta Gupta, Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj, Sunila Kulkarni Gupte, Lakshmi Karunakaran, Ashwita, and Anjani Rajagopal. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. We'll be back with another bazaar next week. Till then, keep reading and keep feeling proud of being of living and being in this rich, diverse country, which is, I agree, at sometimes problematic, at sometimes confusing, at sometimes bewildering, but it's all part of being this of this great Indian experience that Megha just spoke about. And of course, these two lovely books to help you demystify the present times that we live in. Megha's books After Midnight, A History of Independent India, and Unearthed, An Environmental History of Independent India, all of which you can pick up from our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. We'll see you next week. Till then, keep reading. Bye bye.